So now that I have kind of the basics of like layers and just bringing items in using the place or um, uh, import file functions, then now I can actually start doing the things that Photoshop is designed to do. So remember, Photoshop was originally set up to be like a simulation of what could happen in a black and white or color dark room. Long, long time ago when they built this whole program out. So it kind of simulates like compositing things that you can do with photography, right? And so the basic thing that people generally want to do when they bring an item into Photoshop is they want to like make an adjustment to an area of an image. So in this case, I could make a adjustment to like this kind of cat, right? So if I wanted to, I could make I could go in here, select this layer, and I could start adjusting the whole layer. But what if I just want to do like one little section or one little chunk? That's where these items over here in the toolbar that are kind of important are called selection tools, right? And so this top tool up here, you have I call it the arrow tool. Sometimes I call it the black arrow tool or the move tool, right? So this allows you to grab things and like move them around. So I can, if I have this layer selected, I can scoot it around the screen. And it just allows me to like grab stuff and move it, right? Right underneath that here, you're going to have selection tools. And anytime you see in an Adobe product these little like kind of triangles in the bottom corner, if you click and hold, there are multiple options for making selections there, right? And so the rectangular marquee tool just makes a selection that's like, a square. So you kind of click and drag and change it around and just make different selections. The one underneath that is the elliptical marquee tool. So that's where you can like just make kind of circular selections. So let's say I just wanted to cut this cat's face out and use that for something, right? If I wanted to, I could just make that selection. And what that means now is that anything inside of, I call it the dancing ants, right? This like kind of pulsating black and white line here, dotted line. Anything that's inside of that is what I have now selected to. So I'm going to do things to that spot. So I can like mess with it, I can change it, but it's only going to mess around with the things that are inside of that spot, right? And so selections are like the basic thing, basic tool that you'll use in Photoshop. And so there's ways you can adjust your selections. So you can like feather it, which will kind of like change the edges so they're more fuzzy. You can go in here to selection and you can actually like really get detailed with the kinds of selections that you can make. So that again, that all has to do with what's happening within this dancing ants kind of area that you've kind of highlighted, right? All kinds of stuff that can happen. Probably the easiest thing to do, just to learn how to work with this, would just be to go up to edit and go to copy. So what it's going to do is it's going to copy whatever I have inside of that selection, and then if I go back to edit and I go to paste, you'll see that now if I turn everything else off, I just have whatever was inside of that selection has now been pasted into layer one. So I would probably just, if you just kind of control click on this, you can rename it, and basically, or I guess you just kind of have to click once inside the tag, but there's different ways to rename it and just call it like, I'd call it something I can remember, because eventually you'll have a million layers and it gets really confusing about what's what. So now I have this cat face, which I can move around the screen wherever I want to, right? So if I wanted to turn that back on, now I have, I have this one. So hopefully that all makes sense. It's just whatever I selected, I just cut and pasted out of there. So, but a cool thing you can do also would be to like make a selection, and then if I hold the shift key down and then make another selection, it's going to combine those kind of selections together, right? And so I'm kind of adding to the selections here now, right? Making a little pattern almost. Now if I cut and paste, which I'll just use the keyboard shortcut, just like in Word or any of those other word processing programs. Let's hit Command C, Command V, and now all the stuff that was inside of that selection has been selected, and I cut that out and I pasted it on, right? Another good thing to know that you can do is to make like an inverse selection. So let's say I want everything but the cat's face, right? So I can make the selection and I go up here into the select menu and I can go inverse, and that's, you'll see the dancing ants now show up on the outside. So now if I cut that out and paste it in, I now have like I've cut everything except for that cat's face out. So again, lots of different ways to change the stuff around. But the other, so that's just a basic selection thing. You're going to do a lot of selections and a lot of adjustments within those selections. But the more advanced way to make a selection are all hidden underneath here, like these. The lasso tool is kind of a way to like freeform draw this. So if you wanted to just cut the cat out, you could kind of go in here and like do your selection, and then hit Command C and then Command V, and you'll see that it cut out whatever I had selected, right? That's the basic kind of old school way of making selections in Photoshop. There's also one called the polygon lasso tool, which will let you kind of do these things more like geometrically. And when you complete it, it'll make the selection. Anytime you don't like your selection or you don't want to do anything with it, you can just hit select deselect or Command D, and that'll just get rid of the dancing ants so that they're gone. So then if you keep going, you'll see a ton of other options on this list for like making selections, right? So if you wanted to make like just the cats, you could go like this and just go like object selection, and it'll kind of like automatically sense this for you. The robots are going to help figure that out. You can always hit the option key here and kind of try to refine that a little bit. Again, I can go in here and sort of try and figure that out, and if I hit Command C, Command V, you see that, okay, I've cut out most of the cats. So there are all these options for that'll just make selections for you, right? Object selections, all that kind of stuff. But the main thing that I want to try to teach everybody is that the best way to make selections that are like really foolproof and really usable would be to create a mask. So this would be kind of the pro way to do like a cutout like this if I was trying to cut this cat out, right? So what I would probably do is just start with like the magic wand, and I'll just draw like magic wand is, or lasso tool, I'm sorry. I'd probably start there, and I just kind of draw like a rough outline around this cat to try to get like, because I can't really figure out what's shadows. The cat's almost the exact same color as the floor. So the computer is going to have a hard time telling what's cat and what's floor, right? So if I do a rough selection like that, if I just cut this out and pasted it in now, it would look pretty crummy, right? But if you go down here, I have my layer selected, and you select this little button here that looks like kind of a piece of paper with a hole punched out of it. If I click that, that's going to make a mask. So you can see here in the layers palette now, I have two options. I've got the actual image itself and then the mask that I've created. And so if I click over here, you'll see these kind of brackets move, and that's telling me whatever I'm doing to this image now, I'm doing it to the image itself. And if the brackets are over here on the black mask, that means whatever I'm doing, I'm actually doing to the mask. And so basically the idea here would be make sure that you have your layer selected, make sure you have your mask selected, and then you can grab the brush tool, which is this one right here, click on that. And then if you have white selected, it's gonna like basically it's deleting areas out of the mask, right? So I'm only messing with the mask right now, not the image underneath, and it's kind of deleting the mask away. But if I switch the color, so you can see there's this little arrow here where I switch the black with white, now I'm deleting the mask, and I can kind of actually get in there really tightly and like fix some of these things and make it look better, right? So especially if I wanted to zoom in, which I can use this magnifier here, I can zoom in on it. I can actually get in there, and you'll see that I make sure I have my mask selected, and then I can switch back over to the brush, and then I can actually get in here and really carefully like delete things. So up with every time you use the brush, there are all these options up here to control what's going on with the brush, right? Like the size, there's presets you can choose. So hardness is how like soft the edge is. So if I crank the hardness up to 100, it's going to be a really like hard edge that I put on this as I cut it out. If I adjust the hardness a little bit, again clicking here and dragging this back a little bit, it's going to give it a little softer edge. And if I want to change the size to make it smaller, I can go in here and like kind of use that same tool to change that. So I'm like, okay, this is kind of a sharp looking edge here. If I wanted to soften that, I would just switch my colors so that I'm revealing the image underneath and try to get this a little bit more carefully cut out so that it doesn't look so, the edge doesn't look so hard, right? So I can kind of fix a bunch of things. Again, like there's lots of great tutorials on YouTube about how to cut things out and composite them together, but this is the basics of creating a mask, and you can get really detailed with it, zoom in as close as you want, make your brush really tiny and really go crazy with it. And anytime you're like zoomed in really far and you're just kind of like, I wish I could see what the whole image looks like, you remember you can always double click the hands. If you just double click that hand, it'll zoom it back out and fit it into your screen for you. But there you go. So now I have my cat. The cat's been kind of cut that out, and if I turn on the layer underneath it now, so you can kind of see that I've cut away all of that excess imagery, and now that it's only the things that are within that mask. But we started this all off with like a selection, right, which is a pretty simple straightforward way to do it. So remember, the basic building blocks of Photoshop are bringing in an image itself, making selections, and then doing something with that particular selection. So we'll talk a little bit more about what all that means now, but just keep in mind anytime you're working in masks to make sure you have your layer selected and the mask itself selected before you go too crazy with the brush. So